Hey everybody, this is Jason with GetMorrOutdoors, and today I thought I would talk tomahawks, hatchets, tomahawks, throwing axes, whatever you call them. I've enjoyed using them for a long time. I have been throwing knives and axes and tomahawks and hatchets pretty much all of my life since I was a little boy. Had a lot of fun doing it, and let's start off by just saying what is the difference between a tomahawk and a hatchet, because there are some notable differences. There are some differences that definitely make it tomahawk more conducive to actually throwing, more comfortable, and it's even safer when you're talking about throwing it. This is actually a full-size throwing tomahawk, and this is what is referred to as a mouse hawk. This would be something that would have been more used by the Native American children as they were growing up, and the women. You know, it's a lot smaller, lighter weight, doesn't quite have the same amount of range to it, but they're still quite usable and a lot of fun to throw. You know, when people think of tomahawks, they always think about Indians, Native Americans. And there's a big reason for that. You know, I'm sure, like a lot of people growing up, we saw the cowboys and Indians, and you know, you always saw it where the Indians were portrayed throwing tomahawks, and because of clever Hollywood camera trickery, it looks like they're throwing it, you know, 100, 200 feet through the woods with perfect precision. Well, that's definitely Hollywood. I can tell you from experience that's not realistic. But what is realistic is actually throwing these things with a lot of accuracy, a lot of force, between about 20 and 40 feet. Now, even though the tomahawk is, you know, everybody thinks Indians, the tomahawk design is actually based off of the boarding hatchets that were once used by the Royal Navy. And, you know, those boarding hatchets, a lot of times they would have either blades or like a curved hook on the backside. And it was so when they had to board an enemy ship, they could actually spike into the wood sides of the ship, climb themselves over. They immediately had a very deadly weapon for close, you know, quarters combat. They could hack through, you know, rigging and ropes and really wreak devastation on the ship. So even though Indians, you know, that's what you think of whenever you think tomahawk, that's not actually where it originated from. But it is a very usable design that was adopted by the Native Americans as well as non-Native American settlers, just because of the simplicity of the design, the way the handles are, because I don't care if you're using a hatchet, axe, tomahawk, eventually the handles are going to need replaced. But show you some notable differences here. Okay, you'll notice right away that usually a hatchet or an axe is going to have more of a curved handle to it. In the case of a hatchet, the handles are usually shorter. When we got the tomahawk, you notice that the handle's quite a bit longer. It's also straighter. Well, there's also another really big difference to it. And see if I can show you right here. This one will come off easily. There goes the handle. Okay. The way these are, you know, if you were on the American frontier and you had a minimalist amount of tools and you break a handle on a hatchet or an axe, well, now you've got to have a seasoned piece of hardwood, and it takes a lot of precise carving and care to actually accurately carve out the end of it to be able to fit an axe head, because the axe head actually seats down on these shoulders, and then you have some type of a wedge to be able to spread this out so that it actually holds the axe head on. Whereas if you break or destroy the handle to a tomahawk or something with that similar design, okay, it could be just as simple as cutting a branch or a sapling that has the right taper, cutting it off, sliding it into place, and you're good to go. You're talking a few minutes versus a lot of painstaking work. Okay? That leads me to why I think that the tomahawk is a safer bet when it comes to actually throwing. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's heard some of those horror stories where, you know, somebody has been, you know, splitting wood or some other function with an axe, and the head flies off, slips off because it was loose, and ends up hitting, or, you know, hitting, wounding, or possibly even killing some bystander because the head flies off. You know, and that could happen if you're using hatchets to throw. Because of their design, the head goes on the top and it is spread out, and if it gets loose when you're chopping wood, when you're throwing it, the head could actually come off. Whereas with the way a tomahawk is designed, every time you're throwing it, every time it's hitting, when you're chopping, striking with it, all that inertia and force is actually forcing the head of the tomahawk tighter onto the handle. Definitely a safer alternative. You're probably going to end up damaging the handles. It's just a lot easier to make you a new handle and slip it in place, or you can even buy replacement tomahawk handles. And tomahawks are not that hard to come by. You can do a search on where to buy tomahawks online, and a lot of your reenacting stores that would sell like period correct clothing and the reenactment kind of things for some of these get-togethers, you can definitely get tomahawks and mouse hawks from those kind of places. Another reason why these were actually favored by not only the Native Americans, but also a lot of the frontiersmen or people who lived out far away from the settlements. You can actually remove the handle, and now you have something that you can use basically like a knife for skinning or other intricate tasks. You also have something that you can use as a fleshing or scraping device whenever they were making leather out of animal hides. So for all these reasons, that's why the tomahawks were definitely favored. I like throwing them just because it's a lot of fun, you know, and there is a safe way to set it up. You can set you up in an area, you know, to where you're keeping bystanders safe, you're keeping yourself safe. And I may go into that into a later video if I see some interest there. I may show y'all how to kind of set up a little makeshift throwing range. That way you can do it safely. You know, and by all means, if you got a tree you don't care much about, well, ready-made throwing range. Just make sure it's done in a safe way, because while you're practicing, you're going to be missing a lot, and whenever you hit your target, whether it be a tree or what have you, it can skip off and kind of go haphazard. So just be safe about it. But yeah, there are a few things that I do whenever I get a new tomahawk. There's a few things that I do before I even start throwing it. One, they usually come kind of dull. Okay, not much good in that. I guess you could stick that maybe in like a cork dartboard, but probably not gonna be the best to try to stick into a tree or a piece of wood. Also, the handles are unfinished, which means if they start getting wet and dry, they're going to swell and shrink and swell and shrink. And also, they normally don't come with any type of a blade protector or a mask. So, in a nutshell, I like to make some sort of a mask for it. That way, you have some way of keeping that blade covered up when it's not in use. Also, I like to go ahead and treat the handle. That way it stays on the head of the tomahawk a lot better. Now, I could pop this off of here, I'm not going to. In fact, I do this to my axes. If I have to rehaft a handle onto it, I do the same thing, and that is actually treat the unfinished wood so that it doesn't take on moisture, it doesn't take on water, it doesn't deteriorate nearly as quickly. Basically gives it a natural sort of a finish, as opposed to using something like a urethane or a clear coat. Another option you can do, and this one's about in need of having another one put on here, but I basically did a wrap, and this was basically to protect this area up here, where if you do miss, or if you're chopping something and you happen to kind of glance off, it just helps to better protect the handle, and it just kind of looks cool. But it is a lot of fun to throw hatchets or tomahawks. hatchets and tomahawks, really. You know, maybe at your next get-together, try it out beforehand, but at your next little get-together, get out in the yard at a barbecue or whatever, and instead of the traditional horseshoes or lawn darts, hey, get out there and throw tomahawks. It's a lot of fun. It's something that I started both of my children when they were younger. I started them throwing tomahawks, and they got quite good at it. But it definitely helps you to develop a lot of hand-eye coordination. Better helps your depth perception and distance perception, because throwing tomahawks is all about judging your distance and knowing how many revolutions so that you can actually stick your target. Okay, first thing I do is I treat the entirety of the tomahawk. Okay, now a lot of people probably aren't going to be familiar with this product because it is one of those things that was traditionally used and has more or less been kind of forgotten about with the advent of modern chemicals and coatings and things of that nature. But this is all natural. This is boiled linseed oil. Okay, and this stuff is great for protecting any of your metal implements from rusting, but it's really good for treating untreated wood and giving it a natural water resistance. And it really, if you coat it 2 or 3 different times and let it cure, it really seems to make the wood more dense and give it a smooth finish, and it just seems to be a lot stronger and harder and resistant to breaking and splitting once it's been treated with this. Word of caution, if you do use this as boiled linseed oil cures or dries, it actually heats up and it could spontaneously combust. Okay, like I said, I've never seen it happen. I do know it will get hot as it cures. It's like it heats up, some kind of chemical reaction. Not really sure. But just use some caution. If you're using rags or whatever to apply boiled linseed oil, then I would put them in a place to where they can thoroughly and completely dry out and cure without being close to flammables. I wouldn't take the rag soaked in this stuff and just toss it in my garbage can on a hot summer day. Might not be good results. So just a word of caution. So you can use some sort of a rag to apply this. I'm wearing nitrile gloves. I would advise you wear some type of gloves. I guess it's not totally necessary, but keep you from having to try to scrub this stuff off your hands, because it is a natural oil. It's a oil from linseed. Okay, so, and that's another interesting little side note on boiled linseed oil. That's also one way you can make your own oil canvas or oil cloth. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to do the entirety of the tomahawk, because like I said, this is going to give the metal a natural rust protection. And when you're putting this on metal, you don't need a whole lot. Only so much is going to penetrate into the metal. It's not nearly as porous as wood, obviously. Okay, and so now that's coated. It shouldn't take very long out here in the sunshine for that to actually cure and be ready, but that will go a long ways towards helping to prevent this tomahawk head from rusting. Now, when you're doing the wood part of a tool, it's really going to depend on how porous the wood is, how much it sucks up the oil, to how many coats you're going to actually want to put on it. But just be sure that it does thoroughly dry to the touch between coats. Make sure it has time to actually cure before you put a second coat on it. And this is naturally going to go ahead and cause this wood to swell just a little bit. But unlike if it absorbs water, it's not going to swell and then shrink and then swell and then shrink. it's going to swell, and it's pretty much just going to kind of settle into its form, and it's not going to have a lot of movement. And that is why this one that I've already done, it doesn't rattle around. I could get it off, but it's pretty much on there. You know, it's not going to slide off real easily. So we have it good and thoroughly coated. Now it can cure and dry, and really once this is cured and dried, there, that's on there. Once this is cured and dried, really it's ready to throw. You know, the wrapped handle or the mask is really just kind of an afterthought. So yeah, that's really the biggest part of it, is getting the Tomahawk ready to throw. That way it'll last a long time and you're not constantly having to mess with it. But that's what I do to my Tomahawks. And if you've ever seen some of those old movies, or you've watched a movie where they're throwing Tomahawks and you think to yourself, hey, you know, that looks pretty cool, well then give it a try. It is a lot of fun. It's kind of like a big person's grown-up game of darts. You know, there are different games that they would actually play with Tomahawks, whereas, you know, basically a group of people would all throw at a target, and whoever was furthest from that target, well, he would have to stick his Tomahawk in the target, and then everybody else would throw and try to hit the handle of his Tomahawk. Basically, this game goes on until the winner is the only one left that has a usable handle on their Tomahawk. So that's just one of the games that they would play. And there was others, but it's just a really good way to be able to get outside with your kids and have some family fun, time spent together. And like I said, it's a really good way for children to develop that hand-eye coordination, and it's a lot of fun. Give it a try. A lot of kids will take to it right away. It just seems like a really cool thing to do, right? But yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you think. If you got something out of it, leave me a thumbs up. And until next time, guys, y'all take care. This has been Jason, reminding you to get more outdoors. Hey guys, I didn't want to leave you hanging thinking that I wasn't going to explain how I went about doing that cord wrapped handle, as well as the protective cover, the mask for the Tomahawk. But I can already see that this video is getting a little bit more lengthy than I had anticipated, so my plans are in the very near future to go ahead and make a couple of follow-up videos to actually explain and show how I go about doing that to anybody who may be interested. So if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, that way you will be notified when I do upload that future content. Alright guys, you take care.